Good morning, River City. Hope you guys are doing well today. Thank you very much. They didn't respond when I did that in the first service, so that surprised me. Glad you guys are excited to be here. My name is David Tillman, one of the pastors here at the church, and we are celebrating today, Palm Sunday, which is kind of marks the beginning of this Easter week, this last week of the life and ministry of Jesus here on earth. And the title of the message today, if you like those sorts of things, is When Love Comes to Town. When love comes to town. And you know, for me, one of the struggles of this Easter week and kind of the events of this week and looking into the story is that as we follow Jesus along the road, I struggle to put myself in the crowd there. And I struggle to realize that these are real, actual events that happen in real time that his followers experienced because of the distance that we have from the story. And when I say distance, I mean we have chronological distance because we know the end of the story. And so it's tough to feel the pain and the anguish of things that are happening when we know what's about to happen right after that. It's also hard to feel the highs when we know that the lows are coming. But then we also have physical distance because we're not in any danger as we talk about it. But the followers of Jesus that are walking the road with him, their very lives were in danger for being with him and following him closely in that way. So those are some of the reasons why I struggle to put myself in the story, but to feel the ups and downs and emotions. But this last week, I came across a story that I think will help us just as we think about our own lives and about the highs and lows that we experience. And hopefully this story will help connect us with that. And as we move into the story of this Easter week, will help us connect with the emotions that the followers of Jesus were feeling. The story I want to tell you is about a guy named Bill Morgan, who in 1998, he lived in Melbourne, Australia. And his life was kind of like a country song in 1998, and not one of the happy ones. He was a truck driver and he didn't have enough money to buy a house, and so he lived in an RV down by the river, and he was not trending in the right direction. He was lonely, didn't have anybody that he could love, and so he was sad about the way that his life was heading, but things got worse. He got in a crash, and the result of the crash was that he had a heart condition. And the heart condition was something that would stay with him for the rest of their life. Story gets worse because he goes into the hospital to deal with the heart condition, and they say, hey, no problem, we've got some medicine to give you that will help your heart condition, which causes him to have a heart attack, and he dies. For 14 minutes, he's clinically dead, and then he wakes back up. You think, man, that's cool. Actually, okay, but then he goes into a coma. And when he's in the coma, the doctors gather his family around, and they say, hey, Bill's gone. And Bill's not coming back, and what we need to do is pull the plug, but we need you to tell us to pull the plug because this is kind of over. We don't have anything that we can do. Well, luckily, this is where Bill's circumstances started to change because his family said, I appreciate the advice, but what we're going to do is get a second opinion. And so they transferred him to a different hospital, and then within a few days, Bill made a complete and total recovery, which is pretty cool. And then what's also really cool is that 12 months later, we look in on Bill's life, and this was his situation. He had gotten a brand new job that he loved that paid more than the other one that he didn't even really like. He met and married the love of his life, so he wasn't lonely anymore. It's pretty cool. And he went down the convenience store one day, and he bought a little scratch-off lottery ticket, scratched it off, and won a $30,000 car. And so now he's got a brand new car to drive to his new job. So things are looking up for Bill. Well, the local TV station, they find out about this, and they say, well, this would be a pretty cool story for us to tell everybody right after we tell them about all the really terrible things that happened in the city. We're going to tell them this good story right here at the end to make everybody happy about their lives. And so they bring him in, and they're interviewing him. They get done with the interview, and they say, hey, I want to go film some footage to kind of play behind the interview just for interest. And what we'd like to do is go to that convenience store, just have you buy another lottery ticket and scratch it off. We're going to film it. And then when we do that, it'll be something cool to play behind. Just kind of play it up like this is the time when you won the car. And he said, okay, cool, I'll do that. Now I could tell you what happens next, and it would be great. But instead, I'd like to show you 35 seconds of what happened when Bill went in and bought that other ticket, and they're filming him. Take a look.
I just won 250,000. I'm not joking.
You're not, are you? Really?
I just won 250,000. No, please don't kill me.
You have too. Congratulations, Bill. Good on you. Fantastic. Look. It's just...
I think I'll have another heart attack. I won 250,000, honey. I have. We got that new house.
I think we've got a picture also of Bill and his wife that he called and told that he had won again. Imagine Bill's life. There he is at the lowest of lows. He didn't really like the way that his life was trending. And even though he was upset about that, I mean, at least he had life. And then it looked like that was going to be taken away. And there he is, and 12 months later, he gets out of the hospital. He's got a new wife that he loves, so he's not lonely anymore. He's got the car that's paid off, and he's got a house now that he paid for with cash because he also won $250,000. That's a pretty crazy from the high to the low. And in our lives, my hope is that in looking at the story of Bill and then reflecting on our own lives, I doubt that anybody here has ever been kind of left for dead like Bill was, and I don't know if we've got any two-time lottery winners in the room. If we do, that's great too, but probably we're somewhere in the middle. But we can at least relate to sometimes life is really hard, and sometimes we experience something that feels like desperation, or we experience hopelessness or maybe abandonment. And then we can turn around and just a few days later, we can get this huge win. Maybe it's relationally or some kind of financial windfall. And we know and we experience in our lives, because we don't know what's coming next, just the depth sometimes of our emotions and then the exhilaration of the highs. And my hope is that in reflecting on that, we can kind of come down into this story, following Jesus down the road to Jerusalem. Forget that we know the end of the story and just place ourselves in the crowd this morning. Our text is Matthew chapter 21. One of Jesus' disciples recounts this day in the life of Jesus, the day that we celebrate as Palm Sunday, in 17 verses in Matthew 21. We're going to read just the first few verses here, and this is how he kind of lays out what happens at the beginning of this day. Matthew 21, and we're going to go verse 1 through 11. When they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus then sent 2 disciples, telling them, "Go into the village ahead of you. And once you'll find a donkey tied there with her foal. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them at once." This took place so that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Tell daughter Zion, see, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did just as Jesus directed them. They brought the donkey and its foal, then they laid their clothes on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their clothes on the road. Others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them on the road. Then the crowds who went ahead of him and those who followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven." When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in an uproar, saying, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." So as we place ourselves in the story here, we see that Jesus and his followers are on the way to Jerusalem. And the reason that they're on their way to Jerusalem is because this is the time of a huge festival that was taking place in Jerusalem, and it was the festival of Passover. This city of Jerusalem would swell from tens of thousands of people to hundreds of thousands of people. Scholars say maybe up to 1 million people would flood into the city for this Passover celebration. But this isn't just a routine time that Jesus and his followers are going to this Passover celebration like they had done many times before. And the way that we know that, the context comes from another one of the Gospels. Luke, in his Gospel, chapter 9, verse 51, this is what he says happens before this. When the days were coming to a close for him to be taken up, he determined to journey to Jerusalem. So this time comes when Jesus realizes that it's time to fulfill his mission. And so he sets his face towards Jerusalem, to go to Jerusalem at this time, because he knows that his mission to come and save the world, to die on the cross, to be raised up. He's been telling his followers that this is going to happen, and he knows that now is the time for him to accomplish that mission. So he goes to Jerusalem, not for a routine festival, but he goes there to provoke a confrontation and to cause this to happen, because he knows that his time is at hand for this. And so he's on his way to Jerusalem, and as he goes, he's just doing Jesus things, which is teaching people with an authority that they've never heard before. He's healing people because that's what he did. He's feeding huge multitudes, and he's doing all of these miraculous things that they have seen him do. And he comes to a place called Bethany. And as Jonathan taught last week, that when he gets to Bethany, he goes there because one of his friends, Lazarus, has died. And he raises Lazarus from the dead. And he tells them, I am the resurrection and the life. And so they're standing there looking at this one. They knew he could do all of these other things, but now they're saying, even death, life and death, the power of those things are in his hand. Who is this person? And they're amazed by him. And so then this other thing happens right before, at the end of Matthew chapter 20, that two blind men, they call out as Jesus is going down the road, and they say, Son of David, save us, have mercy on us, because they want to be healed. Now, this term that they use, Son of David, it's a messianic term. Now, the people of Israel are under the oppression. They're occupied by Roman forces. So their land is not their own. They don't govern themselves. It's the Roman forces that govern them and tell them what they can and can't do. But they have this promise from the Old Testament that one day this king would come. And they're looking for this Messiah, and they're looking for this king. And Son of David is a specific messianic term that refers to that king that would come and deliver them and set up the kingdom and throw off their oppressors. And so when these guys say, hey, Son of David, and they call him that, they're saying, you're the messianic king. And Jesus does something interesting in that moment, is that he doesn't stop them. He allows them to say that, and he receives that title saying, yes, I am that messianic king. Because there's an interesting thing that happens in the Gospels before this. If you've read them, you know this, that Jesus is doing this curious thing where people say, oh, you're the Messiah, or you're the Son of God. And he says, hey, be quiet. Don't tell anybody. Hey, you've healed me, and you're the one that was to come. Hey, go back to where you came from and don't tell anyone. And this frustrated the disciples like crazy, because they're thinking, you need a better PR guy, Jesus, because you don't understand how this works. If everybody's ever going to realize who you are, you have to let them tell you. But the reason he was doing it is it's not time for that. You need to stop. Yes, okay, come down here. But now, knowing that the time has come for him to fulfill his mission, he says, yes, I'm the Messianic king, and I'm the one that's come for that. So, yes, I'll heal you, and you can come and follow me. So they fall in line with the crowd. And so the disciples are elated because they're thinking, he's finally getting this right. This is great. He's going to go and he's going to set up his kingdom. We've seen all the miracles that he's done, so he can just throw them away and just set up the kingdom, and we're going to rule in the kingdom. This is going to be awesome. Then another interesting thing happens is there's this matter of the donkey. And he tells them, because they're in Bethany, which is about 2 miles from Jerusalem. He says, guys, go to Bethphage, which is about a half mile from there. And he says, there's a donkey. Go get it, and if you're walking away with it and they say, hey, what are you doing stealing my donkey? Then just say, hey, well, the Lord needs it, and they'll let you take it. I never really understood this before, but it's knowing the geography. It's just half a mile away. Jesus, his best friends live a half a mile away in Bethany. He's been there a lot. He just raised Lazarus from the dead. These people know who Jesus is. So he says, when they ask you who wants it, tell them it's me, and we'll get it back to them. It's fine. And they'll send it. It won't be a problem, and it isn't. And Matthew says, they didn't really realize this at the time, but Matthew says all of this happened because this was a fulfillment of a specific prophecy. And it was the prophet Zechariah, 500 years before Jesus, in Zechariah 9:9. This is what Zechariah prophesied. He said, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout in triumph, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, humble, and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So when Jesus says, go get the donkey and tell them I'm going to be riding it because I'm the king and I'm the one that's going to be riding. And so you can see that as they move toward Jerusalem, the momentum is building and the crowd, their anticipation is getting more and more, and his disciples are excited, which leads me to another thing that I really never understood about this story, is that they're coming to Jerusalem and all of a sudden there's this huge crowd. And I thought, well, where does this crowd come from? How did they hear about Jesus, and why are they laying things on the ground? What's the deal with the palm branches? It just seemed odd to me until I realized, and actually studied it this week, that this crowd is not from Jerusalem. This crowd is from Bethany. These are all the people that have been following this. These are the blind guys that had said, hey, you're the son of David. He says, yes, let me heal you. Now fall in line with us. And all of these people are following Jesus because they've seen him do miraculous things. They've seen Lazarus be raised from the dead. They've seen what he's done. And they said, this is the one that we're waiting for. So they're going ahead of him. They're traveling with him. And to everyone that will listen, they're saying, this is the king. This is the Messiah that we've been waiting for. Praise God, save us now, and all of their hopes are riding on what they think that Jesus has come to do. Whether they really realize what it is that he's come to do or not, they say he's the king and he's different. So when they come to Jerusalem, the people say, who is this? Why is everybody making a big fuss? And they say, this is Jesus. He's the prophet from Nazareth. I want to read to you the next few verses, 12 through 17, where Matthew tells us the rest of the story. This is the rest of what happened that day. So Jesus went into the temple, and he threw out all those buying and selling. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, it is written, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you're making it a den of thieves. The blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. When the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonders that he did, and the children shouting in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant. And they said to him, do you hear what these children are saying? Jesus replied, yes, have you never read? You have prepared praise from the mouths of infants and nursing babies. Then he left them, went out of the city to Bethany, and spent the night there. So Jesus comes into Jerusalem with all the fanfare, all the people screaming, causes this huge uproar. And what they think is that he's going to go and confront Rome. That's what they hope. Instead, he goes straight to the temple, and who does he confront? He confronts the religious leaders. And he goes in, and this is the story of what's going on here. He starts flipping over the tables of all those people that are buying and selling, and the tables of the money changers. And when they went to this festival, this Passover festival, there were sacrifices that were required for them. Now, they had to have animals to sacrifice, and the animals had to be certain kind of animals. They had to be perfect, without blemish. There's a lot of things that had to be true about these animals. A lot of these people had traveled from a long way, so couldn't bring these with them, and so the solution was, we'll just sell these here in the temple. That on its own wouldn't have been a problem, but the problem was that what they did is they said, hey, we're going to sell all these animals here, and then what we're also going to do is we're going to charge a lot of money for these animals because they have to have them and they're here. We're the only game in town. It's kind of like when you go to Disney and you need a bottle of water and they say, that'll be $12. It's like, what else are you going to do? It's 100 degrees. I'm going to buy a bottle of water. But that's what's happening here is that they're saying, we have a captive audience here. We're just going to charge a lot of money. Oh, and by the way, you can't pay for these things in your own currency from where you came from. You have to change them into the common currency. But no fear, we got tables over here. Well, we'll do that for you. And our little measures that we have, they kind of work in our favor. And also we charge these fees in order to change the money. And that's going to be really expensive as well. And so Jesus walks into this, and he doesn't like the fact that the people are coming to worship God, and all of these impediments are in their way. So that is what angers Jesus, and he just begins to flip over the tables. Can you imagine? You guys know how you're supposed to act in church. It's supposed to be quiet. It's supposed to be in order. It's a holy moment, and he comes into that and just starts ripping things up and throwing things over. You can imagine how mad that made the rulers of the temple. But when he gets done doing that, he does something that makes them even more mad. He goes over into the corner and says, now anybody that wants to experience the power of God, come over here and allow me to heal you. And he starts healing people right there. The guys that think they have all the power, that are saying, if you want to get to God, come through me and come through our system and go over here and change your money and pay. Jesus tears all that up and says, just come to me and you'll experience the power of God. And we see their anger because the little children that are running around in the temple, they begin singing a song that scholars tell us is probably something that they learned as a little kid. Hosanna to the Son of David. That wouldn't have been a problem, except the person that they were singing it to was to Jesus. And so here's this term again. The Messianic King is here. Yes, they had that hope, but what the priests were upset about is that they were ascribing it to Jesus and saying he's standing right there. And they said, you need to stop them. And Jesus said, I'm not going to stop them because this is something that God has revealed to them and it's the truth. I am the king. And then Matthew ends the day by saying he just turns around, he walks out, and he goes back to Bethany and he spends the night there. So they walk the 2 miles back to Bethany. And they spend the night. The day's over. Can you imagine, though, as we just put ourselves in the story and we try to imagine what it's like for these disciples, can you imagine how pumped they were on the way back? They've been wanting this to happen forever. They've been wanting everyone to realize who Jesus was. And finally, it's happened. Yeah, I can just picture them high-fiving each other and saying, can you believe, did you see what he did? He flipped over the tables. Those guys lost their minds. They were so upset, but they didn't do anything to him. Then he goes over there. He's healing people. The kids are praising him. They're telling him to be quiet. And Jesus just walks out of there like a boss. Was that not incredible? They are so excited. Now, they had other ideas what he was going to do with it, but they were so elated in that moment that Jesus was finally being recognized for who he was. They're on cloud 9. They had to feel like double scratch-off winners in that moment right there because of everything that was going right in their life. But as we step back from the story, there's at least a few things that to me are surprising. When love comes to town, love comes into town and immediately there's a confrontation. Now, that's not something that in our culture, or really in a lot of cultures, but for sure in our culture, we don't understand love as confrontation, do we? Love is the opposite of confrontation in the United States of America right here in 2024. Love is whatever anybody says, wants to do, whatever they say, that's fine. Love just says, absolutely cool, live your truth. That's what love means. Love would never say, hey, that doesn't make sense, that's not true. No, I'm going to confront that. Love would never do that. But Jesus comes to town and immediately there's a confrontation. He says, hey, we're in the house of my Father. It's supposed to be a house of prayer, and this isn't what it's supposed to be. You know, there's actually 3 things going on here. Is that we see the king riding in from one side of the city, saying, yes, I'm the Messiah. I'm the king that was promised. But on the other side of town, there was another display of power. From the other side of town, the Romans would ride in. And every single year during this festival, this Passover festival, the Romans would ride in because the Passover festival, from their way of thinking, was the Jewish people celebrating something that could be possibly dangerous. If you remember from the Old Testament, what the Passover celebrates is this, that the people of Israel were enslaved in Egypt. And when they were enslaved in Egypt, they cried out to God. And what did God do? God sent a deliverer. He sent Moses to tell the Pharaoh to let his people go. He said no, and what did God do? He sent these plagues, and he ended up crushing the power of Egypt and leading his people out of Egypt. So you can imagine, the Romans know all of this, so they say, oh, okay, there's 1 million people in this city, and they're celebrating, throwing off their oppressors and getting out from under them and God leading them. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Every year we're going to ride in, and I'm going to have the governor be on a white war horse, and he's going to ride in with all the power and the might of Rome. And you can imagine in these small streets, horses riding down, soldiers and all of their armor walking through the streets. And what they were telling the people is this: you can have your festival, you can celebrate, you can feel good about your nation, you can do whatever you want to do, but if you get any ideas, if you even think about revolting, we just want you to look at the power that we have. You don't have anything like this, we will crush you, we'll kill you all if we have to. And they meant it. They would absolutely do it. They wanted everyone to remember that we have a power that's never going to end in their minds, and we'll crush you. And then in the temple, we've already seen the power that was there. They say, hey, the way to God is through us. You better not offend us, because if you offend us, we'll throw you out of the temple and you won't be able to come and worship God. So we've got a way that you need to come to God, and it's through us. And then on the other side, we have the king riding in. They think he's going to go confront Rome head on, but his entrance into the city is a confrontation with Rome. But he doesn't start there. He goes to his own people and he says, no, the way to God is not that way. The way to God is actually going to be through me as the king. And so he offends all of them, but he also offends the power of Rome. They saw Caesar as God and Lord and the one that you should give all of your allegiance to. And he says, well, there's a new king and there's a kingdom, and when that kingdom is gone and it's forgotten and it's something you read about in history books, the kingdom that I'm going to lead is still going to be around, and I'm going to be a king of that kingdom, and it's going to cover the entire earth. And so he's also offending the power of Rome. And what he's ultimately doing is he's coming to provoke a response. You see, when Love came to town, he wasn't a victim in any way. This isn't, well, Jesus just got caught up in this swirl of events and he ended up dying, and man, that's a tragedy. No, he is provoking this. He is on a mission from God to save the world from their sin. And I love the way that Tim Keller kind of frames this up, author and pastor Tim Keller. He said that basically what Jesus is doing is that he's coming into the city at the height when everyone is there at a specific time, and what he's saying to the Roman authorities, what he's saying to the Jewish leaders is, this ends right now. This ends right now. It's like when you watch an action movie and there's that big time at the end when, the bad guy's over here and the hero's over here, and they say, whatever happens, let's gear up. This is ending right now. That's what Jesus is doing. He's marching in, and really what he's saying to them is, you have two options in this moment. You can crown me or you can kill me, but that's really it. You can crown me as king, or you can put me on a cross, but I'm not giving you any other options. I'm not coming for diplomacy. There's not like a third way where I'm going to just kind of bring all you guys together. Everybody can have what they want. No, he's saying, I'll either be the king or you'll have to kill me. And this is how Tim Keller puts this. He says, either you'll have to kill Jesus, or you'll have to crown him. But the one thing you can't do is just say, what an interesting guy. His claims don't allow that type of answer. You see, because salvation is from Jesus alone. It's bowing to him as king. It's not found in strength. It's not found in making yourself stronger through religion. But it's through realizing your weakness. So when love comes to town, it comes to confront of other things, false hope. The false hope is found in making ourselves good enough or strong enough. The false hope that comes from maybe a political power or a political party or maybe getting the right people elected. But the king comes. And the only response in the presence of the king is to bow. And when we surrender, then he gets on the throne. He forgives our rebellion. And that, of course, is how salvation comes to us. Sin is ultimately us trying to exalt ourselves to the place of the king. And so when he comes bringing salvation, he says, well, you can't fill that role. So what I'm going to do is, instead, I'm the king, and I'm going to step down from the throne, and I'm going to humble myself. Because like we said, this is the highest of highs for the disciples and for all those following Jesus. But as we know, we can bring that back into the story now, that we know that 5 days from now that Jesus is going to be hanging on a cross. And he's not going to be hanging on a cross as a victim, but as a victor, because that's what he came to do, is to crush the power of death, hell, and the grave, so that you and I, so that you and I could be forgiven. And that's what the King has come to do. And it's not just salvation that he brings, but in our lives as Christians, we have the power of the King when we are with him. It's a power that comes from his being with us. When Jesus said that all authority is given to me and I'm going to be with you. That's the beauty of relationship with Jesus. Is that he doesn't give us resources and say, okay, now you've been forgiven. I'm going to just give you all these resources. Now you can go out and just kind of figure it out because you've got all the strength that you need. No, it's actually the opposite of that. He's always got all the strength. And we're the ones that are always needy. But the good news is he's always with us. The strength is his, but he's with us. We are the sons and daughters of that King who's not far off in the heavens, but the King that came to us. And then he walks with us. Another thing that I think is surprising about this story is that when the King comes, he comes in meekness. And meekness is not a word really that we like. Because I don't think we really understand it. We hear meekness and we think weakness. And really meekness is something that is not at all like weakness. Because meekness is strength, but strength that's under control. It's not weakness in any way. It's not inability. But it's power that's under control. It's a king that is patient with us. In one of Peter's letters to the churches, he says that God is patient with us because he doesn't want anyone to perish, but he wants everyone to come to the knowledge of the truth. See, that's good news for us. Because when the king comes to town, he doesn't come to town to crush everyone. He doesn't come to town to crush you. He doesn't walk into your life and say, hey, now I'm going to crush you. He comes in your life and he says, hey, I really, really need you to crown me because what you need is me, and I want to give you myself. I know that you're weak, but I don't want you to try to make yourself stronger. I want you to just see that I'm your strength and I want to be with you. The king is patient. And ultimately, as he comes, we have to decide in our lives if we've never considered his claims, we have to think about that. Has Jesus been crowned in my life, or am I trying to shut him out? When he says, crown me or kill me, in my life, has that been one of those things where I'm just like, you know what, I need you gone from here. You're not the king of my life. I want you out of here. And then for us as Christians, we have this opportunity. We have this opportunity because just as the crowds realized who Jesus was as he's coming into the city, and they're going ahead of him, and they're saying, he's the king. And people are saying, who is this? Hey, this is Jesus. This is the one that we've been waiting for. You and I have this opportunity because as we walk with the king, you'll have the opportunity when people say, why are you happy? Why do you have joy? You say, well, there's this king that I know, and he's my king, and he's with me, and he's approachable. He loves me, and he's the one that I want to get the glory in my life, and you need to know about it. And so as we walk through our lives and he's enthroned in our life, then everything that we do, everything that we say screams out, he's the king. He's the one that's worthy of praise. He's my life and he is my everything. And today as we celebrate, we're going to be reminded of what it is that he came to do. We do this every week as we celebrate communion. And this week it's so poignant because we're going to remember that this king enthroned in heaven, that he humbled himself. And he took on the form of a servant and even became obedient to death on a cross for you and for me. And so we celebrate that today, and we come and we bow before him. In just a minute, We're going to give you some time, and you can grab the elements of communion back there or here in the front. And this is just a time to thank God for what he's done. And then also, if you've never considered what he is, who he is, and what he came to do, this is a time for you to say, God, I want to crown you in my life. I thank you that Jesus came. I want you to be the king of my life. So let's pray together. Jesus, we worship you today. We stand in awe of you today. Because though we deserve justice, we've received mercy. And though we have no right to call you Father, you've given us that right. You said everyone that believes on your name, you've given the right to become children of God. And that is what we are. God, we thank you for that. And as we sing and we celebrate, we just want to offer our whole self to you, God. We just want to lay our whole lives at your feet and say, you're the King. Do as you please. In Jesus' name.